Joined now by our Canucks reporter, Jeff Paterson, host of Rink-Wide Vancouver, and of course, columnist with Canucks Army, where this week, Jeff, you wrote on 5 Canucks entering make or break territory. For those who missed it, give us the skinny.
Well, I think people can probably figure out that Vasily Podkolzin's at the top of the list. A lot of talk this offseason about the youngster, although he's not that young anymore, at 23 now, 5 years removed from that 2019 draft class of his. And we know that he had that rookie season, 14 goals and 26 points, and played, I think, 78 or 79 games. And it looked like that was going to be the jumping on point to a long and productive career. And since then, it really has been a case of a young guy going in reverse, and a bunch of coaches at both the NHL and the American Hockey League level. And I kind of feel that it is now crunch time. We know that there's no safety net for the organization. They can't send him down to Abbotsford without clearing waivers. And I think Vasily Podkolzin is the type of player that a lot of those bottom feeders around the National Hockey League would be wise to take a crack at. Like, that's kind of what waivers is for, a guy that hasn't been able to hit in an organization, and the mechanisms are in place for him to get a second chance somewhere else. I don't think he's thinking about second chances at this point. He wants to make it happen here in Vancouver. But if he is put on waivers at 23-year-old, with the physical tools that he's got, I have to think that a San Jose or an Anaheim or Columbus or whoever has waiver priority would put in a claim. So I don't think he's getting through. And that makes for a fascinating sort of subplot to training camp, that there's a glut of wingers here with what the Canucks have done in the offseason. And it's on him now to step up and show up. If you remember last year in Victoria, he got an opportunity on the first couple of days of training camp to play with JT Miller and Brock Besser. He couldn't ask for a better spot. I don't know if he's going to get that opportunity this time around. They've got new faces that are going to feature in this lineup that I'm sure they want to slot in and see what they've got. And so really going to be interesting to see where it goes from here. But this is a player that played 16 games last year, had 2 assists, didn't score. Got a look in the playoffs briefly, but didn't do a whole lot with that opportunity either. And so he just looks like a guy that's in his own head, afraid to make mistakes. He has to find a way to get past that. And if he's going to become the player that the Canucks hoped that he was going to be when they took him 10th overall, then it is go time for Vasily Podkolzin. So there's no question in my mind he's at the top of any list in terms of make it or break it candidates for the Vancouver Canucks.
Do not disagree one iota, my friend. With the signing of Sprong, and of course they have some affection for Sherwood, right? They specifically targeted him after that series against the Nashville Predators. Where do you think Vasily fits in this lineup? And if he doesn't, Jeff, then what would be your confidence level that he can be what we hope he becomes by beginning the season as a 13th forward?
I think my expectations have dropped now to the point that if he's going to make this team, it's probably going to be as the 12th or 13th forward. And could I see a world in which the Canucks had a fourth line with Vasily Podkolzin and Kiefer Sherwood, Teddy Bluger in the middle? That could be a line that was difficult to play against. 2 guys that get in and bang and crash, and Teddy Bluger, defensively responsible, isn't going to hurt you. So that, to me, kind of feels like best case right now for Vasily is making this team as a fourth line guy. I think he's in a real battle, and the next 2 guys on my list of make it or break it were Phil DiGiuseppe and Nils Aman. And I do think that those 3 guys are all sort of battling to be the extra forward on the Vancouver Canucks, because when you just look at the newcomers that they've brought in, those guys are going to get an everyday opportunity. There's no doubt about that. So now it's about slotting others. I suppose Nils Höglander and ultimately where he falls in the equation may impact some of these guys that are a little further down the depth chart. But Phil DiGiuseppe is what he is. Rick Tocchet appreciates sort of that veteran quality, a guy that shows up and gives you what he can. But we all said at this time last year, if he makes this team and is in the top 6, good for him, not great for the hockey club. And of course, that's exactly what happened. Didn't last long. And so DiGiuseppe brings some penalty killing utility. But let's be honest, at this stage, there isn't a whole lot more than that. And then Nils Aman is a guy that just way too quiet on way too many nights. He's got the size. Maybe he gets a leg up because he's got the versatility of being a center, but boy, it's been a struggle for him in the faceoff circle, and that's a tough way to make a living in the National Hockey League, playing that position. If I think he was in the 30 percentile on faceoffs the first year, bumped it up last year, but is a career 40-something faceoff guy, and that's an area that he would have to get a whole lot better. So I think Podkolzin, DiGiuseppe, Aman are all considered bubble guys as we sit here a month out from training camp.
Yeah. I've literally never watched Neil Zaman play and go, huh, nice play. Not once. No, it has never happened where I've.
Do you not remember that marvelous performance in Young Stars when we were there in the neighborhood section down there in the corner? You, me, and Jeff, and we went, wow, this Swedish free agent. He looks the part of an NHL. You see that back check? No, you don't remember that? Maybe there were too many neighborhoods. I think that's what we're getting in. Hey, Jeff, just before we leave this, you put Arthur Shelovs on this list. Explain, good sir.
Yeah, now I qualified it, and I want to be careful here that I qualify it again. It's not make or to break it for his NHL career. He's a 23-year-old who's done everything the Canucks have asked of him to this point. But goaltending is such a fickle position. It's a numbers game always. It looks like he has the backup job to Thatcher Demko, but this is a guy that's only ever played 9 regular. He's played more playoff games. He's got more playoff starts on his resume than he does regular season games. So he has to go and prove that he can hold his own. And we've talked about the workload and the job share and all that kind of stuff. And are we looking at 27 to 30 starts for Arthur Shelovs? Guys, the Canucks are in a win now mode. If the backup can't hold up his end of the bargain, there was already talk this offseason about would the Canucks go into the market and try to find a replacement for Casey DeSmith, another veteran guy that has NHL games on his resume that could sort of hold down the fort in the event that Demko either is injured or just with the workload that you expect from the backup goaltender. And so why I've got Shelovs on this list here is you never know when these opportunities come along again. And if the Canucks were forced to go out into the market and bring in a backup, Shelovs can play in Abbotsford. He can continue to develop, but it looks like his time to be a full-time National Hockey Leaguer and leave the minors behind is now. And so in the here and now, I kind of feel like, what's he going to do with this opportunity? Is he up to the challenge again? He has answered every question the Canucks have put in front of him, including 10 playoff starts and a Game 7 against the Edmonton Oilers in the second round. He's been terrific for a 6th-round pick in that 2019 draft. He's come a long way in a relatively short period of time, but we've also seen guys that don't make the most of an opportunity kind of have to go to the back of the line, and then does that opportunity present itself again? So it's a slightly different scenario for Shelovs, but is he going to be up to the challenge here and be able to hold down the fort in those 20 to 25 or 30 starts that you would expect from the backup this season as the Canucks control Thatcher Demko's workload?
Back to Podkolzin, wanted to ask you, with that rookie season, what do you remember of what he did right that allowed him to produce like that? And was it just because they were a shitty team and it wasn't a whole lot of rules and different coaching? No, that was still the Travis Green era, if I'm not mistaken. So there's more rules than the Bruce Boudreau era, that's for sure, in terms of what you should be doing, what you shouldn't be doing. But why was he able to do that? And is it just user error? Is it on the player that he hasn't been able to replicate that?
Yeah, my recollection from that season was because they just had such a lack of quality at the wing position. By default, he got opportunities way higher in the lineup. He played a lot with JT Miller that year. I remember him scoring from distance, and we all marveled at this big-time wrist shot that he had. Not slap shot or snap shot, but this was a guy that would corral the puck, pick his spots, and I can picture a couple of his goals right now as I'm talking about them, where we were like, wow, this is a big league wrist shot at the very least, if there isn't more to his game. Now, I remember in his draft year, all the talk was, he's not going to blow you away with flash and a ton of offense, but this is a well-rounded guy that is going to develop into a player that can play in all situations, is going to be out there late in games, protecting leads, has some more playmaking ability than perhaps he was given credit for in the run-up to his draft. And it just kind of feels like it's been a confidence thing with him that he gets in his own head. And now it feels like the offensive switch has just been completely shut off. Like in those games that he got last year, I don't recall him looking dangerous. It wasn't a case of, he just didn't convert the chances he had. I just don't remember him getting many chances. Now, he was physical, and he does have to, that's got to be who he is. That's in his DNA. He's got a pro-sized body, but there's got to be more. There has to be more there for him to be an every night National Hockey Leaguer. So I think they've worked with him. We've seen the resources that this new management group has poured into player development, and he's been a part of that. It worked for Nils Höglander. So can they replicate that success? And I'm not expecting 24 goals out of Podkolzin, but they made Nils Höglander a National Hockey Leaguer by some tough love, sending him down to the minors, putting him in some spots to continue to grow his game. They basically did the same thing with Vasily Podkolzin last year. But, if you just look at his 3 pro seasons here in North America, the rookie season was terrific. There was nothing wrong with the rookie season, but it's just been steady decline since then.
I do remember him going to the net in the final, quarter of the season more, but Jeff's right. The wrist shot from distance, I think, is what stood out. Jeff, the Athletics fan survey of confidence in front offices is out, and the Vancouver Canucks have come from the depths of 30th place in this ranking last year, and that was the Rutherford Alvin era. Remember, right? That was the leftover. That was the remnants of the clunky firing of Bruce Boudreau and other things that went wrong that year. They are up to 5th behind only Florida, Dallas, Tampa, and the Utah Hockey Club, which has also come from the depths of despair. Is it merited? Do you think this is a top 5 front office in the league, or at the very least, do you understand the confidence, newfound, that Canucks Nation has in this front office?
Well, having worked in this market for as long as we all have, I was surprised because I think skepticism comes with the territory here in Vancouver. And until they either get to a Stanley Cup final or get their hands on the Stanley Cup, I think there are some that are going to say, show me the job that these guys really have done. And Alvin himself, when he sort of pounded the table and said, we haven't done anything, even though they got and pushed Edmonton into Game 7 of the second round of the playoffs. So I was surprised that they moved into the top 5, but I was also surprised that the Utah Hockey Club was in there. So I'm not really sure what to make, but those top 3, you're keeping pretty good company there with the Florida Panthers, who won the Cup. Tampa obviously has the long resume, and Jim Nill, the 2-time defending GM of the year. So, look, I think they've earned the benefit of the doubt. They had a terrific offseason a year ago with all of those short-term contracts and guys that came in and contributed to the cause, and many had career years and all of those types of things. So there was a lot of good done by this management group, and they look like they got it right with Rick Tocchet. And I was skeptical too. I just didn't know a whole lot about Rick Tocchet as a head coach. Watched from afar when he was in Arizona, but didn't have a lot to work with and didn't have a lot of success there. I didn't know they were certainly high on Tocchet as their guy, and it's proved to be the right call. So I can understand why they rocketed up the standings, if you will, but there is still work to be done without a doubt here. And can they replicate anything close to the summer they had a year ago? When you have a bunch of guys that have career highs, that's really tough to make happen 2 years in a row. So went out into the market. I thought they were prudent in their spending. They targeted some areas. Last year it was penalty kill, and penalty kill came from the depths of despair to the league average. Can it grow again? There's room for improvement, certainly. But this time they knew that they needed wingers and scoring help, and they went out and addressed that area too. I think they've done a nice job of reallocating money from areas where they have a surplus to be able to target some areas of need for this hockey club. But also their hands are a little bit tied by their own doing with the OEL buyout, and we'll see how that impacts things. But there's been more good than not by a long shot here with this management group, and it was fun to be part of those 2 rounds of the playoffs, and let's see if there are 2 and maybe more next spring.
Are you confident, Jeff, that 2 of the 3 defensemen at the bottom of the top 7 can play on an every night basis? The Desharnais, Forbort, Juleson, 2 of those 3 will be playing on any given night as it stands right now. How does that hit you?
Yeah, I'm really curious to see what they do with their defensive depth chart. I think we all think that they're going to start the season with Hughes and Hronek again and try and juice that top pairing. But after that, those guys can play 25. Some nights they can play 30, but simple math tells you there's still 30 other minutes that have to be allocated. And I think Carson Soucy, when he was healthy, showed that he can certainly help this hockey club and do the things that you would expect from him. I wrote about Tyler Myers this week at Canucks Army as well, because he got the 3-year extension. He's going to be 35 in February, and father time comes for everybody at some point. I'm not saying that it's going to happen for Tyler Myers in the first year of this 3-year deal, but we all know his penchant for penalties. Took the 3rd most penalties among any defenseman in the National Hockey League last year. If the foot speed. And right now, I mean, he skates beautifully for a big guy, but if the feet go at any point, you would expect that would probably mean more penalties. That puts the Canucks in a tough spot, obviously. And as much as Soucy and Myers got the shutdown assignment against a guy like Connor McDavid in the playoffs, the underlying numbers were brutal. Like, they got absolutely caved. Now, the puck stayed out of their net, but they spent so many shifts running around in their own zone, keeping the Oilers to the perimeter, but 2-minute shifts stacked on 2-minute shifts where all they could do was ultimately get the puck, flip it high to center ice, and get off the ice. Eventually that's going to come back to bite you. So Myers is going to be a fascinating study. We know that he's a guy that's in the spotlight in this market, has been for the bunch of years that he was here under the first contract. It's a 3-year extension. So I've got some concerns a little higher. I mean, the roundabout way of getting to your question, Blake, concerns a little bit higher. And then, I think Derek Forbort, he is what he is. He's just a big body that eats pucks, and I think can do what he does effectively here. But then there are questions, and they seem to think that there is more to give from Vincent Desharnais. So is it as simple as Forbort and Desharnais are your third pair, or are we going to see some sort of experiment here where a guy like Desharnais plays higher in the lineup? And if that's what the Canucks are thinking, then I would just caution, this is a guy that was a healthy scratch for the Oilers at the highest of leverage games in the Stanley Cup final. They brought him right out of their lineup. So to think that he couldn't play for the Oilers, but now he's maybe going to be Quinn Hughes' partner because they see upside, maybe it's there. Like, I'll trust the instincts of the coaching staff, and that's what training camp and preseason is for, I suppose. But no, I've got the concerns that I think a lot of people have about a little bit lower in the depth chart, and that's why I thought even that little bit of money that they spent on Daniel Sprong, I guess I just thought it was earmarked to try to find a way to upgrade the defense core at some point here moving forward.
So you're not a believer that, Desharnais has only played 140 some NHL games. Big guys are late bloomers, and there is more untapped potential in this guy, even at age, even at age 28.
I need to see it, and I just go on the way that the coaching staff in Edmonton utilized him in the playoffs, and I understand. I mean, the size is undeniable, and they think that he's that ball of clay that they can mold into something. And look, they brought the best out in Tyler Myers last year. Give this coaching staff, the systems and the structure, some credit. So if it can happen, Adam Foote is probably the guy, the big man whisperer, if you will, because it worked with Myers, and maybe they can do the same with Vincent Desharnais. I just am pointing out the pitfalls if they're going to go into the season thinking that, hey, we're going to shock the world, and Vinny Desharnais is going to be the caddy for Quinn Hughes. I'm not convinced that that is the blueprint to success for the Vancouver Canucks.
Okay, final question from me here, Jeff. Are you done with hockey? Can I ask another poll question?
Sure, yeah.
Do you want to see Vancouver host another Olympics, Jeff? And the poll is so worded that we have excluded Whistler. No offense, Whistler, but because this guy wanted to keep it open,
we didn't say winner.
Be an appetite for the summer games. But do you want to see Vancouver host the Olympics again, whether it's winter or summer?
I guess I've always come from the camp that I thought 2010 was a once-in-a-lifetime experience. But as we see now, the IOC going back to a place like Salt Lake City, and I get the cost of the games and places that have infrastructure, it only makes sense to consider some of those previous host sites. So on that front, it was an incredible 2 weeks. It was. I look back fondly. I did shows with you guys, remembering at Robson Square, and we weren't rights holders, so I wasn't on the front line, but in that international broadcast center at Robson Square, I remember doing a show where Scott Moyer and Tessa Virtue, the day after they won their Olympic gold at the Coliseum, brought their medals down and did a radio row, and it was incredible. Just that kind of experience. So I loved being in the middle of it. Those sunny 2 weeks in February, the weather was incredible. I know they had to truck some snow into Cyprus, but we'll leave that aside. So, yeah, I mean, selfishly, I think by the time it would get back to Vancouver, we'll probably all be out of the business. So at that point, you can put your feet up and just be a spectator, right? Like, it's not going to happen anytime. Well, it's not going to happen in the next 10 years. I think they're all spoken for. So, yeah, selfishly, I would say, sure, bring it on, understanding the unbearable costs for many that come along with being a host site for the Olympics.
Just going to say he's got 4 children. He needs to eke 25 more years out of this business.
Yeah.
He's just getting started, just getting warmed up.
He's mid-career.
Absolutely.
Buddy, you're in for me next week. And this time I'm positive of that. I've checked the schedule. So thank you for that. Appreciate this. Have a good weekend, Jeff. And the audience will hear from you next week.
All right. You enjoy a little downtime, Blake. We'll fire it up on Monday.
Hey, everybody, if you're enjoying what you're seeing here, then follow along with Sekeres and Price on YouTube. I promise more content coming.
The kids call it subscribe on YouTube.
Well, how about liking it?
Do that as well. Smash it right now.